Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Brothers and sisters, Jazakumullah khair for tuning in for Tafseerah. This is Imam Azeez with the Tarbiyah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all. I know that we've been bombarding your airwaves with all these live videos. It really is not my habit to do that. At the advice and recommendation of all of our staff members. However, everyone felt that this is one of the most effective ways to connect with our beautiful community, to keep everyone attached to the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the Quran, to tarbiyah. So we're doing this, and inshallah after this whole pandemic is over, I think that we've learned something really incredible, that there's so many people out there that could benefit from the material that we put out. And so even though we're gonna inshallah very soon go back to our physical programming, we will however maintain a good portion of all these live videos in order to benefit as many people as possible, inshallah. So again, Jazakumullah khair for putting up with us, for being patient. Please always remember us in your dua every time you see one of those videos. I will inshallah take a picture of the setup here, in my home office, in my study at home. It is quite remarkable, what human ingenuity can produce in such short time because of difficult circumstances. Here's what I plan to do. It is 7:35 right now. I have to pray Maghrib, and you do too, by the way. So inshallah, I will not interrupt the broadcast, but I will just leave everything as is. I will go pray Maghrib with my family in just a minute and come back inshallah to start the program, Surah Yussuf part 4. But there's something I wanted to say before I do that. Believe it or not, today is exactly 5 years, exactly to the letter, to the dot, exactly 5 years after we had our very first Salatul Jum'ah in Rockland. Exactly 5 years. This is technically the 5-year anniversary of Tarbiyah today. Our plan actually, and this has been planned a long time ago, was for us to have our very last Jum'ah at Sierra Gardens today, and spend the rest of the day in celebration. And then next Friday actually was going to be our very first Jum'ah at the new location on Foothills, and the formal transition, from Sierra Gardens to Foothills, for the Tarbiyah House, Roseville. And this coming Sunday was going to be our grand opening. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willed otherwise. And you know what? We are better for it. We are better for it. And our community is better for it. No matter what, however way you want to look at this whole thing, we are better with the choices of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the expense of our own. And remember my words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us something better, beautiful, more amazing, more inspiring in due time. So I've completely embraced the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've completely accepted it. We're making the best of it. And we are working as hard as possible to adapt to these difficult times. And the grand opening will happen when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to happen. We will move to our Foothills property when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills for that to happen. So again, I wanted to remind you of this because it's still a beautiful memory, and it only, what it does really is that it encourages us. It puts more fire in our hearts to be ready for that day, for the grand opening, inshallah, when it comes. And so please remember us in your dua. Continue to pray for the community. Continue to pray for tarbiyah, for the ummah, for the entire world, that this pandemic, inshallah, will be over soon. Jazakumullah khair for tuning in. And like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and pray Maghrib, and I'm going to ask you, inshallah, just leave your phones on, but please go ahead and pray Maghrib, inshallah, maybe about 7 to 10 minutes. We will be back here, inshallah, for Tafseerah part 4. Looking forward to seeing you, inshallah, in a couple of moments. Jazakumullah khair. Alright, you guys, jazakumullah khair for your patience. We're back. Inshallah, we are going to start in 1 minute. So, if you want to take your Qur'ans out and take a look, inshallah, at Surah Yussuf, we will start with ayah number 23 tonight, inshallah. Yussuf 23 tonight. So, inshallah, take your Qur'ans out and open them up to ayah number 23 from Surah Yussuf, inshallah ta'ala. This is Surah Yussuf, part 4. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I begin in the name of Allah. I invoke His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I ask Allah to extend His blessings to the Prophet's family and descendants, to his companions and followers, and all the men and women that walk in their footsteps. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to include us with them. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullah khair, brothers and sisters, for being with us tonight. It's an incredible journey. Tafseerah is just one of those resilient programs. Regardless of the circumstances, we keep going on and on and on with this program, alhamdulillah. We don't stop. We are in the shade of the Quran, in the shade of the beautiful tree of the Quran, and there is nothing in the world that is more rewarding, that brings more insight and more satisfaction to the heart than being in the company and the companionship of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For that we are grateful. We continue with this amazing surah of the Quran. As I said many times before over the last couple of weeks, Surah Yussuf was revealed towards the very end of the 3-year stretch that was the economic boycott. As I said before, this was one last tactic that the people of Quraysh used in order to pressure the Muslims, particularly the tribe of Banu Hashim, which was the tribe of the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Talib, his uncle, and some of the greatest supporters, including Hamza and others. So Quraysh wanted to make an example of them and to punish the entire tribe, Muslim and non-Muslim in the tribe, by casting them into a small neighborhood that belonged to Abu Talib, that belonged to Banu Hashim, in which they were confined in that space. They were not supposed to do business with anyone. They were not supposed to talk to anyone. If someone said salam, nobody responds. They cannot marry into other families in Quraysh, and other families cannot marry into them. And literally for 3 years, the Muslims survived off of smuggled food, right? And they would eat like tree leaves and vegetation and stuff like that, to the extent that many family members of Banu Hashim and the Muslims ended up perishing during this boycott. Abu Talib himself and Khadija radiallahu anha, they passed away shortly after the boycott was concluded. We're talking about year 10 now of the prophetic mission. Towards the end of the boycott, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Surah Yussuf. What was happening at that time is that there is this band of 5 men led by a man by the name of Hisham ibn Umar. He belongs to the tribe of Banu Lu'ay ibn Amir. He was not even Muslim, but he was an honorable man. He felt that there's something wrong with the terms of this boycott. How could we allow our friends and our extended family members to suffer in the boycott? So he led those men, and on this mutiny, basically, that ended up causing the disbanding of the boycott. And that is basically when the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, they started realizing and accepting the simple fact that the sum total of our efforts, of our endeavors, may not necessarily lead to the desired results that we had in mind. And that while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects from us to put the effort, He also controls the bigger picture, and maybe after putting all the effort you realize that God took you in a completely different direction. But if you don't put the effort, you are standing still. You're not making any progress. You're not moving in any direction. But when you put the effort and when you endeavor and struggle as much as possible, after you've done your part, you surrender the matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you say to yourself, you know what, the Lord will take care of it. He will take me into any direction. The Muslims put the effort in those 10 years and five, unknown people, from not unknown, but five people from Quraysh who are not even Muslims are the ones that brought relief. The relief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes camouflaged in all kinds of different ways. That relief comes from sometimes the most unpredictable paths. And to that end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals Surah Yusuf in order to show the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, and to show subsequent generations such as ours, that again, if you examine a man's life, in which case this is the life of Yussuf al-Insan, Yussuf the human being. A lot less Yussuf the Prophet and a lot more Yussuf the human being. You look at the events of his life, one event leading to the other, and one event leading to the other, and the sum total of those events is that Yussuf alayhi salam was positioned in a place in which he was able to save Egypt from famine, but more importantly, to save his own family. It was through the trials of Yussuf alayhi salam that he eventually amassed enough power to be in a position of authority by which he is able to save his own father, Yaqub alayhi salam, and his brothers and his family from possible famine. And we talked about, the last couple of weeks, we talked about the dream of Yussuf alayhi salam, in which he saw all of his brothers, and he saw his father, and he saw his mother, sort of like, well, that is the interpretation. He saw 11 stars, and he saw the moon and the sun bowing out of admiration and out of deference to him. And his father basically told him, his father understood right away what the dream meant, and he basically told him to keep it to himself. But eventually his brothers obviously learned about it, and we talked about this as well, the collusion and the plotting of Yusuf's brother in order to basically get him out of the way, and him being in that nearly abandoned desert well, receiving revelation for the first time. أوحينا إليه لتنبئنهم بأمرهم هذا وهم لا يشعرون. Jibreel alayhi salam came to him. He was a child, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically made him into that incredible prophet, alayhi wa ala nabiyyina as-salatu was-salam, when he was in that young age. He was still sort of like we're not 100% sure. Some scholars say 6, some scholars say he was 16, whatever, somewhere in there. Yusuf alayhi salam was young, but he was mature enough to receive the wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he was basically sold into slavery, and he was picked up by the family of this very powerful politically connected nobleman of Egypt. In the biblical tradition, his name is Potiphar. And Potiphar was, like I said, was a kind and a fair man. He loved Yusuf. He wanted him to be sort of like the son he never had. He was sterile, he was infertile, he could not be with his wife, and so he yearned to have a son. When he saw Yusuf alayhi salam, he saw in Yusuf every quality that he would have had, that he would have desired to see in his own blood son, and he treated him extremely well. But Yusuf alayhi salam was growing and maturing into a charismatic, awe-inspiring, young man. He was strong, he was beautiful, he was sculpted, he had a great personality, incredible behavior, he was compassionate, he was a prophet. He was a prophet. He was a slave, but he was a prophet. And that's perhaps the only instance in all of history, the history of humanity, in which there's a prophet of God that also happens to be a slave. Right? Bear that in mind. And that's where we are now, when he is evolving and growing into becoming this incredible human being. He started basically to incite the temptation of Zulaykha, who was basically Potiphar's wife. She's the noblewoman of that household, right? And let's examine, inshallah ta'ala, in the Quran what happened from that point on, right? So this is ayah number 23. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. The noblewoman in whose house Yusuf lives, she started seducing him. وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. And of course, the story of Zulaykha and her seduction, or attempted seduction of Yusuf alayhi salam, is one that was heavily scrutinized and discussed in of the Quran throughout the centuries. And the whole point here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subjects Yussuf to it. Right? So not only that he is separated from his father and he is betrayed by his brothers, and then he's thrown into a nearly abandoned desert well, and then he's sold to slavery. He is also subjected to this extremely damaging, potentially damaging sex scandal, right? In which his master, the noble woman of the house in which he lives, she tries to seduce him, as if he doesn't have enough problems, right? Yusuf alayhi salam. But what is the point of all this? The point of all this is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show us that virtue, no matter how incredible it is, and how perfect it is, and how pure it is still not immune to temptation. Is still not immune. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to show us in very clear terms that the true meaning of honor is not necessarily in the complete absence of temptation. Rather, it's when we experience temptation, but we still fend it off. That's the meaning of this discussion. That virtuous people do exist. But the fact that they are virtuous doesn't necessarily mean that they will not be subjected to temptation. Right? Because people automatically assume that the righteous, the pious, they're not going to be tested. Nope. They will be tested. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will subject them to temptation, because it actually means a lot more to the Lord when someone does experience the temptation and possesses the desire but still pushes it away and says no to shaitan, as opposed to someone that does not possess the desire in the first place. Right? That is the lesson that we learn here. So you have this incredibly intelligent, incredibly strong, incredibly powerful, incredibly self-confident, incredibly seductive woman, right? She's wealthy, she is smart, and she's filled with desire, because, as I said before, she's not able to maintain a normal, healthy, intimate relationship with her husband. Her husband is incapable, right? So suddenly she herself is tempted by the presence of this, sort of like irresistible young man in her house, right? She's not, a follower of Islam. She does not have the same morals and values that Yusuf alayhi salam possesses. He's a prophet, for crying out loud, right? So she's like, he's my slave. She doesn't know better. He's my slave. Of course, even in her culture, even in her society, it's still a betrayal of her husband, when she does something like this, but she kind of justified it to herself. What's the big deal? So she gently prodded Yusuf alayhi salam into that type of temptation. Gently prodded him. And there's no doubt in my mind that Zulaykha looked at Yusuf alayhi salam not just as an object to satisfy her fantasies, but rather as someone that she truly loved. And I'm sure that it was a while, it probably took years for that relationship to evolve into something that serious. I shouldn't say relationship, for those feelings in her heart, to develop into something really serious. I don't doubt that Zulaykha had true and sincere feelings towards Yusuf alayhi salam, feelings that would probably end up torturing her for years and years to come. Right? And we will examine that together. She uses in ayah number 23, وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. One of those nights, Yusuf was there, he was picking something up from her room. She closes the doors, she closes the windows. And she says to him, what? هَيْتَلَكَ. هَيْتَلَكَ. I am ready for you, right? Some of the scholars in the qira'at, in the schools of recitation, they would say هِيْتَلَكَ or هَيْتُلَكَ. But most of the scholars say, وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابَ وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ. I am yours. I am ready for you. Yalla. Right? Now, this is bold. She used the word هَيْتَ لَكَ, or whatever, Egyptian equivalent of that word, at the time. She did not say, oh, let's do this. She did not use any explicit words, right? But it was still extremely bold. And it tells me that, and some of the scholars actually have agreed to this as well, that she probably spent weeks, if not months or longer, trying to use natural methods of seduction that women would use in very indirect, sort of like perfume or nice words or, references or whatever. But all of her attempts basically fell on deaf ears. Yusuf alayhi salam would never do such thing, right? And so she came to a point where she felt the necessity of saying it so explicitly, haytalak, right? It was still gentle. She did not use any explicit words, but yet it was still extremely, extremely bold. Now his immediate response was, Ma'adh Allah. Ma'adh Allah. Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. May God preserve me. I seek refuge, just like he's A'udhu Billah. I seek refuge in Allah. What are you talking about? I could never do any such thing. And then he says here, Innahu Rabbi, he is my Lord, ahsana mathwai. He has made my stay, he has made goodly my stay in this house. Which Lord is he referring to? Because the word Lord in the Arabic language could mean the master, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the master of the universe, but it could also mean Lord as in Potiphar himself. And the scholars have included both interpretations, right? If he says Lord Rabbi as in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's basically saying, I'm a slave. I could have suffered. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me in this household and he protected me. Considering the circumstances, this is the best I could hope for, right? For a slave, this is the best I could ever hope for. How can I betray my Lord, right? On the other hand, if he meant Potiphar himself, the nobleman of the house, then it's as if he's saying, my master has been kind to me, he's been good to me, he improved my circumstances, he treated me like a son, right? And that's what Potiphar said to his wife earlier. Remember when they had just purchased Yussuf alayhi salam? How could I betray my master, right? Either way, whether he's talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or talking about Potiphar, what Yussuf alayhi salam is doing, basically, he's being the honorable man that he is. But again, think of any other prophet that underwent such temptation while being a prophet. It's incredible. This is absolutely remarkable that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would allow one of his prophets to be in such a tight spot, right? So Zulaykha basically would not take no for an answer, and she continues to pressure him. I mean, again, she's the slave master, remember that. He can't just leave the room without her permission. He can just very respectfully say, please, I can't do this, right? But he can't just walk out. So she does not take no for an answer. She continues to pressure him. She continues to prod him into doing it. And poor Yussuf, he stands no chance with this woman, right? If the scholars talk about Yussuf and the ahadith talk about Yussuf as such a beautiful man, the stories of the commentators have perpetuated and propounded about Zulaykha herself is that she was Miss Universe of her time, and not just in terms of outside looks. She was a strong woman. She was confident. She was intelligent. She had every quality that a man could ever hope for or imagine. Right? Of course, this was a weakness on her part. This was a sinful behavior. This was betrayal for sure. But overall, she was an incredible woman as well. Right? And that's why in ayah number 24, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically tells you that that's it. Yussuf alayhi salam was really pushed to the limit here. Okay? وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ. She basically desired him and she was about to be with him. وَهَمَّ بِهَا, and he did the same. And here's the thing. The scholars are divided into multiple groups when it comes to this. And I know all of you have heard this stuff before. And all of you have wondered about it. Is it really okay? We understand that that's it. Khalas, she's about to have him. But is it really true that Yussuf alayhi salam would be about to fall for it, his will to fall for her seduction? وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا. She was about to have him, and he was about to have her. Right? So the word hamma means to basically have the intention to do something. And the object of this verb is kind of implied here, intended to be intimate with her. So she intended to be intimate with him, he intended to be intimate with her. But some of the scholars say, and this is this is an apologetic approach, all right? Ahmed ibn Yahya, for example, says, no. Her intention was to be intimate with him, while his intention was to hit her. Stay away from me, kind of thing. Okay, I find that to be a bit apologetic. Now compare this with the opinion of Abdullah ibn Abbas, for example. Ibn Abbas himself, the Prophet's cousin, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says that amma bihi means that he intended to be with her intimately, to the extent that Ibn Abbas actually, tells the story in using quite graphic terminology. He says that he was with her in bed, in the position that a man would assume when he wants to be with his wife, and he was about to take off his clothes. Right? So this one extreme of opinion to the other extreme of opinion. And of course, Ibn Atiyah, the great commentator, says, wait a second, guys. If you're telling me that Yusuf alayhi salam was a prophet, yet he was about to, go along with it and carry out this terrible, terrible sin, right? It wouldn't make sense. So Ibn Atiyah's solution was, let's just say he was not a prophet yet. And all the assumption about his early prophethood, since he was in the desert well and all this stuff, let's just cast this aside. It's probably not true. He was still just an ordinary person, and he was subjected to this horrific, act of seduction, and that's it. He was about to fall for it, because a prophet would not do that. Okay? So these are the different opinions. And here's the thing. One of the most beautiful opinions that I've come across, and this is my position, about this matter is Imam al-Qurtubi's opinion and what he propounds. And Imam al-Qurtubi basically says that hamma biha is not about the act. Hamma biha is about the desire of the heart. She desired him so significantly, and he desired her so significantly, right? In his heart, he was about to fall apart. And he was about to give in. And he was about to let it all go and be with her. But he did not take any active steps towards this. Why? Because it was interrupted by the sign of Allah, called here Burhan Rabbi. Okay? Because Al-Qurtubi says he was a prophet. The word awhayna, we've revealed to him, was used earlier. That's it. God does not use that word in the Quran unless we are talking about a prophet. Right? And so he is a prophet. This is inescapable. So Qurtubi says, all there is that he is still a human being, and he could feel temptation in his heart, and he tried and tried and tried until in his heart he was all of his defense mechanisms were about to collapse, right? And it was only right then and there that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interfered with his relief, and he saved him from this situation. Of course, there's this beautiful hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the angels, and this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, the angels came to Allah and he said, Ya Rabbi, هذا عبدك فلان يريد أن يعصيك. Your worshipper so and so, and they would name the person, is about to commit a sin and to disobey you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فارقبوه إذن فإن فعلها فاكتبوها عليه وإن لم يفعلها فاكتبوها له حسنة. Allah will instruct the angels, keep your eyes on him. If he ended up committing the sin, right, then write it against him in his record, or her. And if he or she ended up not committing the sin, write it down in the book of good deeds as a hasana. Right? This is the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are tempted all the time to make mistakes, to do something haram. When we intend to do something good, you get the hasana for it, and if you do it, you get 10 times. But if you intend to do something bad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not write it down unless you actually do it. And if you ended up not doing it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will instruct the angels to write it down as a good deed in your book of good deeds, right? That is incredible. So Yusuf alayhi salam was a human being. He was a prophet, but he was a human being. His defense mechanisms were about to collapse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interfered at the right time with Burhana Rabbi. What is his Lord's sign? What is the sign of the Lord that is mentioned right here in ayah number 24? Again, some of the scholars have had incredible views about this. Ibn Abbas, for example, says that Burhana Rabbihi was a scarf. So she basically said to Yusuf, excuse me, just give me 1 second, all right? And then she took a scarf, she went to the corner of the room, there were her idol god was sitting on the niche or whatever, on the night table. So she goes up to the idol, she covers the idol with her scarf, And when Yusuf alayhi salam asked her, why did you interrupt this whole thing and just go to cover your idol god with a scarf? She said to him, إني أستحي أن يراني إلهي على هذا الحال. I would feel ashamed that my God would see me do something lowly like this. And that's when sort of like the light bulb went off in his head, right? She's embarrassed of her false God. وأنا لا أستحي من ربي, and I don't feel shame in my heart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seeing me. And that's when he stopped, right? But again, this same narrative perpetuates the same exact thing, and that is he was about to do it. He was like right there, right? But he was interrupted by that, and I find that to be relatively weak, right? Now, the other incredible opinion here is that Yusuf alayhi salam was about to do this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed him a sign. We don't know what that sign is, and quite honestly, I don't think we need to. We need to. That sign varies from one person to the other. It doesn't have to be an incredible... Some of the scholars say that it was Quran. I mean, literally they say it was Quran written on the roof about zina. Come on, right? That is quite remarkable. And I think that would be stretching it too far. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left it vague because He wanted every single one of us to relate to it. That the sign of Allah that will deter you from committing sin can actually come in all kinds of shapes and forms. You just have to have the open heart to see it when it comes to you and stops you in your tracks right then and there when you are about to commit a sin. So Yusuf alayhi salam saw the sign and he said, oh my God, I gotta skedaddle out of here. That's it. I have to run. I need to make a run for it. The bed is over here. He's probably standing with talking to her like right next to the bed somewhere in the room, and the door is right over there, right? So he literally makes a run for it to the door. And she tries to chase after him, okay? And then when he arrives at the door, he was about to hold the door handle and open it up. She holds him from his shirt, right? And that is included or mentioned clearly in ayah number 25. وَاسْتَبَقَ الْبَابَ. They raced towards the door. وَقَدَّتْ قَمِيصَهُ مِنْ دُبُرٍ. And she basically snatched his shirt from the back, okay? And when she snatched his shirt from the back, what happened to it, right? It was torn. It was torn, all right? So he still tried to force his way out of the room. He held the handle, he opened up, and lo and behold, who's standing at the door? Who's standing at the door? Her husband, Potiphar, the nobleman of the house. There's a part of me that feels that Potiphar was actually there for a while. And he was eavesdropping. And he knows his weakness. He knows he's impotent. He knows he's infertile. He knows he is sterile. He knows his weaknesses as a man, in the intimate department. And he's so ashamed and disgraced of that. Of course, back in the day, that was completely destructive. It would completely destroy your reputation and your character, right? Today we understand that men are not invincible. I mean, your reproductive system is subject to ailments and disease and illnesses, psychological and physical, like every other organ of your body. There's nothing to be ashamed of, right? You go and seek medical help. But back in those ancient times, it was the absolute most horrific thing for a man, right? I mean, in many ways, it continues to be, in some circles. But the point is, I have a theory that Potiphar was standing outside, and he was sort of like eavesdropping, and he was like probably thinking like, what's going to happen? He had so much love for Yussuf, but he also loved his wife. In a way, he was angry at his wife, but he was also like sympathetic because he understands what she's going through, right? And he was all these struggles in his head while he's standing outside, trying to decide what he was supposed to do, right? It's an incredible moment, right? So Yusuf alayhi salam opens the door. Oh my God. The Lord of the house is right in front of him, right? Immediately, she jumps on it. And we see this in the statement that she made in ayah number 25. مَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ أَرَادَ بِأَهْلِكَ سُوءًا What is the appropriate punishment for someone who was about to hurt your family, who was about to dishonor your family? Suggesting what? That Yusuf alayhi salam attempted to rape her. Right? Now, think about it. In those ancient times, what would the appropriate punishment for rape? You know, a slave who attempted to rape the noble woman of the house, his slave master. You know, what do you think that the proper punishment, the easiest punishment, the no-brainer punishment would have been? Exactly, execution, right? But see what she says. What is the appropriate punishment for someone who tried to rape your own wife? Right? Except that he is imprisoned or punished painfully. Even when she is lying about what happened, her love for Yusuf alayhi salam prevents her from going a little too far and requesting, oh, he has to be executed. If Yusuf was just an object of pleasure and satisfaction for her, he would be completely dispensable, you know, disposable. I tried with him, didn't work out, I will try with somebody else. I have plenty of slaves. But the feelings that she had towards Yusuf alayhi salam, Qurtubi says, were genuine, were real. She wanted to save her face, you know, because again, I mean, how far can she really go? But at the same time, she did not want Yusuf to be the victim, the collateral damage, you know, of all of this. So, you know, she tried to kind of, put some pain on, or put him in prison. All temporary punishments that would spare the life of Yusuf alayhi salam. So Yusuf had to respond, you know, he has to sort of like preserve his own honor, right? So he blurted it out. He راودتني عن نفسي. She's the one that tried to seduce me. I swear I didn't do anything, right? Now, it should have stopped right then and there. The testimony of a slave versus the testimony of the slave master. Think about it. You know, a young man, aggressive young man who's never been with a woman before versus the honorable, you know, lordess of the house. Which of these testimonies should have been believed? Potiphar should have immediately just believed his wife. Take this man and execute him, right? In fact, he should have just taken the dagger or the sword of one of the guards and just boom, did the deed right then and there. It would have been completely predictable, right? Rather, Potiphar, because he knows his wife, and this again supports my theory that he was standing outside and he was hearing this entire conversation, right? He knew what was going on. And he also had, just like his wife, he had a lot of love for Yussuf. So what does he do? He decides to use an arbitrator. We need a judge, right? We need a judge. And you know, وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِنْ أَهْلِهَا in ayah number 26. A member of her own household testified. Okay, what is the nature of that arbitrator or that judge? Again, the scholars are of many opinions. Ibn Abbas, for example, is of the opinion that it was a baby in his cradle, and this baby basically testified. And in a narration, Ibn Abbas says, أَرْبَعَةٌ تَكَلَّمُوا فِي الْمَهْدِ. There's only 4 that spoke as babies in their cradles, right? Who's the first one? This is the easiest one. Isa alayhi salam. The second one is صاحب جريج. Remember Jurayj al-Abid, you know, this scholar from Banu Israel, from the Hebrews. He was once praying and his mom kept calling his name. You know, I need you, I need you, I need you. And he was just praying, you know. So he would not interrupt his prayer to go and see what his mom wanted. So his mom got extremely angry and she said, Allahumma la tumithu hatta yara wujuha al-mumasat. Lord Almighty. She prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord, do not let my son die before he sees the face of lewd prostitutes, of lewd women. What a dua. You know, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your mom would never, you know, ask Allah such thing for you. Okay? So he was a really righteous man. So he lived his life, and then one of those days, you know, a lewd woman came to his to his place of worship. She tried to seduce him. He refused. So she really allowed another man to impregnate her. And when she she got extremely angry. When the man impregnated her and she became pregnant and she delivered the baby, she told everyone that is Jurayj's son. And Jurayj basically came and he asked the son to speak, and the son spoke the truth and said, my father is that man over there. Right? This is the background story. I'm trying to talk about the four babies that spoke in the cradle that Ibn Abbas talked about in this hadith. So Isa alayhi salam, Sahib Jurayj, and Ibn Mashitati Ali Fir'aun. Remember the lady that used to comb the hair of the daughter of Fir'aun, when she was a follower of Islam, and when they punished her, the story in Surah Al-Buruj, Ashab al-Ukhdud, the people that were thrown in the fire pit. So she wanted to go back on her Islam while they were about to throw her and her baby into the fire pit, but she was about to say, you know what, no, I don't believe in this anymore. But her baby spoke in the cradle, and he told her, Mom, ya umma, ithbuti fa anti ala al-haqq. Mom, be steadfast, for you stand on the path of the truth. And they were both thrown in the fire. And the fourth one is the shahid of Yussuf alayhi salam, this witness. There's a lot of weakness in this narration. I share it with you because it's a very common story, right? But a lot of scholars say that this is a weak narration that is attributed to Ibn Abbas, okay? Some scholars say that this witness was actually the shirt itself. It was very obvious. The shirt is torn from the back. It's not torn from the front. And some scholars say that the witness was actually an elderly judge that Potiphar knew very well, and he invited him to come and arbitrate between his wife and Yussuf to decide which testimony is true. So basically he came and he said to them, if the tear in the shirt is from the front, then he was attacking her and he was attempting to rape her, since she was fighting back. And if the tear in the shirt is from the back, then, he's saying the truth and she is lying. And obviously that's what Potiphar knew all along. He just found it distasteful to just go ahead and attack his wife and accuse her of adultery, so blatantly. So he wanted this to just come, from another source. I think that's my theory. So ayah number 28. فَلَمَّا رَأَى قَمِيصَهُ قُدَّ مِن دُبُرٍ. When he looked at the shirt and he realized that the shirt was actually torn from the back, قَالَ إِنَّهُ مِن كَيْدِكُنْ. This indeed is the kaid of you woman. Indeed, the kaid of all women, of all womankind, is great. The word kaid is a very interesting word. It's often translated as plotting, as deception, as equivocation, as guile, right? All sort of like negative words that sort of cast, this blanket condemnation on all women, while the Quran really speaks highly of the Queen of Sheba, or Maryam alayhi salam, or the wife of Pharaoh. The Quran speaks of some of these women very, very highly. And why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speak so highly of those women and then issue this blanket condemnation that all women are equivocal, all women are deceptive, all women are this? I think there's something in that assumption about the word kaid that I don't really feel very comfortable with. The word kaid, in my opinion, means the ability to seduce, actively and passively. And this is really important, because again, if I say that the ability to seduce is just a power that every woman possesses actively, then I'm also making a statement that every woman is out there to get men and is out there to seduce men and tempt them, which is not true, right? And so when I say that the word kaid means active or passive seduction, it pertains to women just being women, to their nature, to their tenderness, to their femininity. Just who they are, they have the power, whether they use that power actively or that power demonstrates itself passively, right? But that power can really move mountains. That power can induce the chivalry of men and get men to do stuff for women, right? that is a tremendous power that every woman actually possesses, whether she acknowledges it or not, whether she uses it or not. It just sort of like projects itself naturally, right? And so in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that the kaid of women is more powerful than the kaid of shaitan. Why? Because in Surah Yussuf, it says, Inna kaydakunna azim. Your kaid, your ability to seduce is so great. Whereas when he talks about shaitan, he says what? Inna kayd al-shaytani kana da'ifa. The kaid of shaitan is weak. The ability of shaitan to seduce has to be very active. He has to come and whisper to us. But the ability of women to seduce, sometimes active, yes, it is true. Send, social mobility, whatever, they use their sexuality. This is actually common, right? But I think that most women refrain from doing that, or maybe sometimes they don't even think about it. It's still a power that exists latently in every woman. That is not the meaning of kaid, in my opinion, right? Imagine this broken husband, right? He knew all along that this was happening, or was, inevitably going to happen. He knew all along that his wife is just way too strong and way too independent and way too confident to just live the rest of her life, without a man. I mean, technically, she was living without a man, right? So he's broken, he's depressed, he's sad. This is the lowest point of his life, right? So he says to Yussuf alayhi salam in ayah number 29, Yusufu a'rid an hada. Yussuf, don't worry. Put this whole thing behind you. Let it pass. Please just keep it between us. I'm so sorry that you had to go through this, right? SubhanAllah. A'rid an hada. Just put this whole thing behind you, and please just don't disgrace me more than I'm already disgraced. Keep this between us. And then he turns his face to his wife and he says to her, and you need to repent. Istaghfiri li dhanbik. Innaki kunti min al-khati'in. For you have definitely, for you are definitely at fault. Right? Now this is a very mild response. With Yussuf alayhi salam, I understand he feels guilty. He feels like Yussuf was going to be used as collateral damage. But his mellow response towards his wife indicates that, number one, he kind of comprehends, even though he's angry, but he comprehends why she ended up doing this. He still loves her so much. He is extremely broken. His manhood is broken, right? And he's not in that state of mind where he would be projecting anger and rage and hurt her or kill her, right? Yusuf, please, just don't say anything about this. I'm so sorry that my wife put you through this, and you need to repent, right? Very, very mild response, not one that you would expect. But here's the thing. This whole thing could have continued to be a weird family affair if it stayed secret between them, right? But once a matter such as this becomes public, it automatically becomes what? It automatically becomes political. If it becomes public, it becomes political, right? So Yusuf alayhi salam actually thinks that he's out of the water. That one was close. So he goes back to his work. He thinks that maybe it'll be over. Okay? But it was not over. Other women, other powerful women, other noble women of that community, they caught wind of this whole story, right? The commentators say that they were wives of other powerful men that were very close to Potiphar himself. They caught wind of the story, and there was chatter everywhere about the noble woman Zulaykha herself that could not resist the temptation of one of her slaves, a Hebrew of all people. A Hebrew slave, she could not resist the temptation. What is wrong with her? She's a weak woman. This is transgression. This is horrible. You're bringing shame upon yourself and us and the family and culture and society. All of Egypt. How could she do this? Right? Ayah number 30. وَقَالَ نِسْوَةٌ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ امْرَأَةُ الْعَزِيزِ تُرَاوِدُ فَتَاهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. All those, oh my God. Can you guys believe that, Zulaykha is trying to seduce her own slave? Oh my God. قَدْ شَغَفَهَا حُبًّا. He filled her heart with love and lust. إِنَّا لَنَرَاهَا فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. She's so bad. She's so bad, right? Indeed, she's committing a great fault, a great aberration, right? But But Zulaykha was not the kind of woman that would take such matter lightly. It just made her more stubborn. It made her angrier. It made her more upset, right? And she did the unthinkable at this point. Instead of playing it low and laying low and trying to just remain silent, because this is gradually becoming a public sex scandal, right? That is shaking the Egyptian high society at this point. All these people are talking about it. If they had the Cairo Times, it would have been talking about it. It would have been, front page news, right? Everyone is now talking about this stuff. Instead of her kind of, denying it or, laying low or, until the dust settles or whatever, she does the absolute unthinkable. She organizes this big feast, and that tells you that those were noble women. They were high society type of women, because they were all invited to her house, and only such women would be invited to her house, right? She brings all kinds of food, huge party, massive feast. She sets up furniture everywhere. They're sitting, they're comfortable, they're eating, they're laughing. Expensive food, all kinds of utensils, all kinds of silverware. And they are eating and laughing, and of course in their minds, wondering, oh my God, well, why did she invite us here? It's unusual, but whatever. We're just going to have fun, right? And then in the midst of all of this, she commands Yussuf alayhi salam to walk in. And some of the scholars see something weird. Okay, and I need to correct something, by the way, about this conversation. Most of you have a certain perception, because you've heard this before. This is not new information to you. But most of you, I think you have wrong thoughts about it. I will correct those thoughts, inshallah. And those thoughts are driven by some of the commentaries of the scholars. So one of the commentators, for example, say that Yussuf alayhi salam was working in the fields, because, she was angry because he rejected her. Potiphar doesn't say anything anymore, so he's not the favored, sort of like the house slave anymore. She threw him out in the fields in order to punish him. So I don't agree with that, but I'm just sharing with you what some of the commentators say. And so Yussuf alayhi salam walks in bare-chested, bare arms, six-pack, beautiful face, incredible youth, every quality that a woman would desire. Right? Now, as a result of that encounter, of course, you know the story, they were cutting their food, so they cut themselves. Just not cut as in cut, as in amputate or sever, no, they just scratched themselves. Oh. They scratched themselves with the knives, some of them at least. Now, here's the thing. If all they saw of Yussuf alayhi salam was his sexuality, if all they saw was his masculinity, if all they saw was their manhood, then what would they have said? They would have said, ooh, Zulaykha, oh, is that him? Oh my God. But that's not what they said. That was not their response. What is the first thing that came out of their mouths? Qulna hasha lillah. Right? Look at the ayah right here. Ayah number 31. فَلَمَّا رَأَيْنَهُ أَكْبَرْنَا. The minute they laid our eyes on him, they exalted him. They thought of him as the absolute most incredible and awe-inspiring thing they've ever seen. They elevated his status. They did not look at him as an object of sexual fantasies, right? They did not agree with Zulaykha and what she was doing. They elevated his status. قُلْنَا حَاشَ لِلَّهِ. May God protect us. May God preserve us. مَا هَذَا بَشَرًا. That is not a mortal man. That is not a mortal man. إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا مَلَكٌ كَرِيمٌ. That is but a noble angel. These are not the statements of women who are basically spell-struck when they saw an incredibly masculine man. These are not statements of women, that are tempted and seduced. And of course, I'm not going to share. There's so many statements that some of the commentators have propounded that are really, really very, very far from the truth. Sexualizing this entire encounter, suggesting that those women, kind of felt all kind of fuzzy and fluffy in their own bodies when they saw Yussuf alayhi salam, really stretching it beyond the proper meaning of the ayat. This whole encounter was spiritual. He inspired those women. They saw prophethood in him. They saw light in him. This looks like an angel, not in the sense of his looks and sexuality, in the sense of the aura and the vibes and the energy that he projects, right? But angry, arrogant, super self-confident Zulaykha, she doubles down. فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي لُمْتُنَّنِي فِيهِ. This is why I invited you, because you have made me the object of blame because of him. And here I am, you heard it from me first. If he does not obey me, and if he doesn't do what I asked him to do exactly the way I asked him to do it, he will be punished severely, right? لَا يُسْجَنَنْ. He will be put in jail. وَلَا يَكُونًا مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. And I will make it my responsibility to insult him and humiliate him. See, that's her arrogance speaking now. That's her arrogance. And still, throughout this whole thing, she doesn't threaten to execute him. She doesn't say, I will kill him. She never says that, right? Because, again, there is some genuine feelings that she had towards him. But again, arrogance, blinds people. Hubris blinds people. She knows she's a powerful woman. Her husband is probably not going to do anything about it. At this point, she completely and fully embraced the public scandal. Yeah, I did it. What are you going to do about it? Right? And she knows, she speaks, the words of someone who fears no repercussions of their actions at this point. She doesn't care. She doesn't care. Yes, she still loves him, but her hubris completely took over at this point. And she's basically, you know what? If he doesn't do exactly what I ask him to do, he will be punished and he will be imprisoned. Now, Yussuf is standing there, absolutely broken and devastated. He leaves. He confines himself to his own room and he starts praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he speaks to Allah and he says, رَبِّ السِّجْنُ أَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا يَدْعُونَنِي إِلَيْهِ. This is ayah number 33. Lord, I'd rather go to prison than follow what they want me to follow. But he doesn't say, he uses the plural here. Why does he use the plural? It's as if he's talking about all those women and not just her, right? Why? Again, because many of those scholars have looked at the story in relatively sexual terms. They would say, because some of those women, they were struck, they were like sort of like starstruck or spellstruck by Yussuf alayhi salam, that they started requesting private meetings with the poor man, asking him to be with them instead of her. Again, I find that to be contradictory with the way they responded or reacted when they saw him, right? My interpretation of this is that many of those women, out of pity towards Yussuf alayhi salam, they would say, just do whatever she wants. We know that you're a noble person. You know that you're a beautiful human being, but you're going to be in so much trouble. She's going to put you in jail, man. Just do it once. Do it once. Let her have whatever she wants to have. So you started getting a lot